Hi, I'm Chelsea of Friday Pattern Company, and today we're doing part 2 of the Saguaro Set sew along, and today we'll be sewing pants. The pants for the Saguaro Set are easy to sew, they're easy to fit, and I'm going to share some extra tips and tricks to make some of the steps a little bit easier. Before you start this video, you should take your body measurements, select your size, and make any adjustments to the pattern that you want, and then cut your pieces out of fabric. And then in this video, we'll go over all of the sewing steps in depth so that you can have like a visual idea of what each of them looks like. And yeah, let's get started. There's a couple pieces of prep we need to take care of before we start sewing our pants, and the first is marking the buttonhole placement on the right side of our pants front waistband piece. So I like to fold the piece down in half or along the buttonhole like this, and then you can line up the notch that you can see there at center front, and then you'll be able to see where the buttonhole is, and I just use my chalk to mark that, and you'll mark both buttonholes. The next thing we're going to do is fuse our waistband interfacing piece N onto the wrong side of our pants front waistband, and you're doing it behind where you just marked the buttonholes, and you have a little notch on there that you can match up and just fuse that in place. The other thing that we need to do is cut our length of waistband elastic, and there are recommended lengths for each size in the beginning of the instructions that you can use, or you can find the length that is perfect for you by grabbing your elastic and stretching it around your body. And I like to pin it in place and like move around a little bit and take some deep breaths to make sure that it feels really comfortable. And the waistband elastic on the pants sits like above your belly button, so just give it a little shake, test it out, and then once you have a length that you like, you can cut that length and make sure that you have an extra inch for overlap so that you can sew it together in a loop. Now we'll get started with sewing. You're going to grab your pocket facing piece I and your pants front G, and you're going to pin them together, right sides together along this diagonal seam, and then you'll sew that using your 3/8 inch seam allowance. After you have that sewn, you're going to finish this seam and press the seam allowance towards the pocket facing, and you're going to repeat that on both sides. I wanted to give you a quick demonstration of an easy way to finish seams on the Saguaro set. This is just a zigzag stitch that you can do on your regular sewing machine. So I set the zigzag settings to 2.5 millimeters by 2.5 millimeters, and then I sew a zigzag over the raw edge of the fabric, kind of overlapping the edge, and this stops it from fraying, and it's a super quick and easy way to do it. I'm actually going to be using my serger to finish the seams for the rest of this project, but I wanted to show you this finish in case you don't have a serger. Here is that seam finished and pressed towards the pocket, and now we're going to understitch on the pocket, and that is a stitch that you add that will stop this pocket facing from rolling outward on to the face of your pants. So what you do is you sew 1/8 of an inch from the seam that we just made on the pocket facing, and you're catching that seam allowance underneath. Here's what that looks like finished, and then next up we are going to grab our pocket back piece J, and we are going to pin it right sides together to the pocket facing along this curved edge. So you'll sew that using your 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then you're going to finish that seam, and this gets repeated on both sides. Here that is finished, and now you're going to fold the pocket into place and align it with the pants. So you flip it over to the back of the pants, and then you can match up these notches and give it a press, and then you can baste along the top and sides of the pants to hold this pocket in place while we finish constructing the rest of our pants. And here is what that looks like finished. You'll repeat that on both sides. Okay, right sides together, you're going to pin your two front pieces together along the curved crotch edge, and then you'll sew that with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and finish it and press it to one side. You can press it to the right or the left, it's up to you. And here's what that looks like finished. Okay, now right sides together, pin your two pants back H pieces together along the curved edge, just like we did with the front. And then again, use your 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then you'll finish this seam, and then you're gonna press it to in the same direction that you pressed your front So right or left, whatever floats your boat. Okay, here's a big step where these pieces of fabric start to look like pants. Right sides together, you're going to pin your pants front to your pants back along the side seams, and then you'll sew down the side seam using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then you are going to finish that seam, and then you will press the seam towards the back of the pants, and you repeat that on both sides. When you're pinning the pants together along the side seams, you have a notch that you can match, and then they should match up at the top and bottom of your pattern pieces. And here we have that finished. You can see that the seams are finished, and then I pressed them towards the back body of the pants. Next up, we're going to sew the inseams of our pants. So we are going to match up the crotch seam on our pants and pin that, and then you'll pin down each leg, and then you can sew this seam all in one go, starting at one pants hem all the way up to the crotch, pivoting down the other leg, and then again you'll finish this seam, and then you're going to press it towards the back body of your pants. And here is how our pants are looking so far. Next, we'll start in on the waistband. First up, we're going to add buttonholes to our pants front waistband piece K that should have buttonholes marked and the interfacing on the back. To sew the buttonholes onto your waistband, you're going to follow your sewing machine's instructions for whatever type of buttonhole your sewing machine does, but a lot of them have this automatic sensor buttonhole, and I just wanted to give you a couple tips about that. So a lot of times you use a button to gauge the size of your buttonhole, but you can actually open it up and kind of use this as a guide to, like, this distance on the foot is how big buttonhole is going to end up. So I just measure it like that and then put the buttonhole foot onto my machine. And then I always like to sew a test buttonhole on a scrap of fabric. And a couple of things to just keep in mind is, like, always double check that you have enough thread in your machine, because I've run out of bobbin thread mid buttonhole and it is truly heartbreaking. And then also you just want to make sure that nothing is going to hit the sensor that you pull down on, like, when the fabric is going in either direction, because it'll cause the buttonhole to stall and get cut short or something like that. And you want to just make sure that you keep the fabric moving, and yeah, that's about it. So you'll sew your two buttonholes onto your pants front waistband, and you need to make sure to open them before you sew the waistband, because otherwise it's a whole thing. When I open buttonholes, I like to put a pin blocking the end of the buttonhole, and then using my seam ripper and pushing towards that pin, and the pin will stop you from accidentally pushing too hard and, like, hulking through the other end of your buttonhole, which is also a major bummer. And then after you do that, you can kind of pull the pin out, and then gently, if there's more buttonhole that needs to be opened, you can just kind of gently open that up. Right sides together, you're going to pin your front waistband to your back waistband along the short side seams, and then you'll sew using your 3/8 inch seam allowance. After you have those ends sewn together into a loop, you'll press your seam open like this, and then we're going to fold our waistband in half lengthwise, going all the way around, and then you can give that a good press as well. And here that is pressed, and now we're going to pin it to our pants. We're going to pin the waistband to our pants right sides together, and keep in mind that the right side of your waistband is the side with the buttonholes on it. So you want to make sure that your buttonholes are facing down on the right side of your pants, because otherwise they'll be on the wrong side and you'll be bummed. So when we're matching this up, you have a notch at the center front, or the center front of your waistband that matches with that center front seam, and then the side seam of the waistband matches up with the side seam of your pants. And you want to make sure that when you pin this, that you keep your seam pressed towards the back of your pants. And then there's a double notch at center back that can match up on the waistband and the pants. And then the other side seam will match up as well. And again, make sure that you've got your seam pressed towards the back of your pants. I like to add a couple more pins in for good measure to hold everything in place. But when we sew this seam, we're going to leave a 2-inch opening so that we can run elastic into our waistband. So I leave a gap in my pins, or clips in this case, to kind of mentally remind myself, because I have forgotten when I'm sewing waistbands and then I'm like, oh crap. So yeah, we're going to leave a 2-inch opening. And I like to put that opening on the back body because just in case, I mean, you're not going to be able to see it, but just in case anything happens, you want like the front of your pants looking immaculate. Here that is sewn, and now we're going to press this before we put the elastic in because it's just a lot easier to do it before the elastic is in there. So we'll press the waistband up away from the pants, and the seam allowance is going to go down towards the pants. Next up, you're going to grab your length of waistband elastic, and we will attach a safety pin to the end, and we are going to run this through our waistband. You'll run the elastic through the waistband by slowly inching the safety pin around, and I kind of just carefully scooch it along, pulling it bit by bit, and you can kind of pull the fabric away as you go, and you'll slowly inch your way all the way around until it pulls out the other side. And then once you have it pulled out the other side, you're going to want to feel around on the waistband to make sure that at no point when you're pulling it through did it get twisted, because if it gets twisted, it's just a whole thing. So once you're sure that it's not twisted and you have it pulled it all the way through, we will take this to the machine and we will join our elastic into a loop using a zigzag stitch. Okay, so here is what that looks like finished. It's just 2 rows of zigzag stitching that are back stitched. It does not need to be pretty. So once you have that, you can kind of pull on your waistband to get the elastic inside. And then we are going to pin shut that little 2-inch opening that we left that we used to put the elastic in. And we're going to sew that shut. After you do that, you're going to finish your waistband seam and then give this another press if it needs it, where you're pressing the waistband up and the seam allowance downward. Okay, cool. Here that is done. And now we are going to top stitch the elastic. We're almost done with these pants. So you want to get the elastic kind of situated perfectly. And when I say perfectly, there isn't really a perfect way of doing this. You just kind of pull on the waistband until the elastic looks evenly distributed, like that you don't have too much gathering on the fabric in the front or the back. And once you like the way it's looking, we'll grab our pins, and then we can place pins going around the waistband every few inches. That's going to hold that in place so that while we're stretching and sewing and top stitching our elastic, we aren't like, it's not like slipping around and kind of getting distributed unevenly. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine, and I wanted to give you a few pointers and tips and tricks for top stitching elastic, because I know it can be a little bit intimidating, but I promise you it's not hard. So the first row of top stitching goes 3/8 inch from the top of the waistband, and what you're going to want to do is set your waistband underneath your presser foot and lower your needle. Then you're going to stretch your elastic so that it is flat, and you'll sew, and you want to pull from both the front and the back of your project, because if you're just pulling from like towards you and you're pulling against the needle, then your project could potentially like slip or skip stitches, things like that. So you want to be pulling from the front and the back, and you can go slowly and kind of sew in between the pins that you put in. And each time you stop, make sure that you lower your needle so that you're holding your project in place while you set up again to pull on it. But yeah, again, just be careful that you're not pulling like on your foot or your needle. You're just pulling a tug of war with yourself. And you'll slowly make your way around the waistband. After you finish your first row of top stitching, you're going to do another one 3/8 inch from the bottom of the waistband. And this one can get a little bit trickier because there's parts of your project that are thicker, like where your 2 front pieces or your 2 back pieces are joined together. So it's just a little bit trickier. It's not hard though, I promise. So again, you'll put it under your foot, lower your needle, and then start pulling your elastic flat and sewing in little stretches, and then you can stop and reposition everything and just slowly make your way around. And if it isn't perfect, this is pretty forgiving once it's finished and everything is kind of gathered in. It's hard to tell if it's off by a tiny bit, so don't stress too much about it. Okay, so here is what that looks like finished, but it's not pressed yet. So you'll notice it's a little bit wavy gravy. And if you take this over to the machine and give it a steamy press, it's going to look so amazing. And here is what that looks like once it's pressed nicely. Okay, time to make the cute little drawstring for our pants. We are going to grab our drawstring pieces and right sides together, sew them along one of the short ends, 3/8 of an inch from the edge. And then you'll press that seam open. Then you're gonna fold your drawstring in half lengthwise and press it in half all the way down the length of it. After you have it pressed in half, you will fold the 2 raw edges in towards that center crease and give them a press again pressing all the way down the length of your drawstring. And here is our drawstring all pressed. You're gonna open it up and fold the ends in just like 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and then you can fold the drawstring in half lengthwise again, and then we'll edge stitch this shut so that we have like a full drawstring. If you want to trim the little corners, this helps hide that raw edge so you don't have to like tuck it in. Then you have a neat, clean, tidy little corner at the end of each drawstring. Here we are about to edge stitch our drawstring, but I wanted to share a trick with you. And if you watched the video, the sew along video for the top, you already know this, but when you sew these little types of things, the feed dogs on your machine sometimes want to suck them down, or the machine has a hard time kind of climbing over the little like lump of something so small. So put a piece of paper, just a scrap piece of paper, underneath your, like between your feed dog and the thing that you're sewing, and then you can sew right on top of it and rip it away afterwards. And sometimes you have to pick some little pieces of paper out of the ends, but it's honestly better than it getting all crumpled up and jammed in your machine. So I'm just sewing across the short end of the drawstring and back stitching, and then pivoting down, and then you just edge stitch 1/8 of an inch from your folded edge all the way down your drawstring. After you have your drawstring all edge stitched and ready to go, we are going to put it into the waistband of our pants. So to do this, you will attach a safety pin to the end of your drawstring, and you're just going to use that to inch your way around this opening through one buttonhole and then all the way around your waistband and out the other. This is kind of similar to when we put the elastic into our waistband, where we're just kind of like inching it through. Okay, we're almost done. Time to hem these babies. So you're gonna press the hem edge of your pants under 3/8 of an inch towards the wrong side. And then you're gonna press it under another 3/8 of an inch towards the wrong side. And here that is pressed in place. And now we're gonna edge stitch along this folded edge 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around on both pant legs, and then we're done. And here is the hemmed pant leg. And if you made it this far, congratulations, you're done. Give your project a good press and trim away any loose threads, and congratulations on your new pants. And here is the full finished Saguaro set. I love it so much. This is a 100% linen fabric. It looks like denim. It's like indigo dyed, but it's actually linen, which makes it very like comfy and breezy. And yeah, I love how quickly this pattern can come together, and hopefully it's something that is fun for you to sew and inspiring. And yeah, happy sewing.